Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to People April, a BookTube event created by Roz at Scally Dandling About the Books and Elizabeth at Bookends and Books, concentrating on, as you can tell from the title, biographical writing. Autobiographies, memoirs, letter collections, full dress biographies, you name it. Even Roz has suggested autofiction. Uh, Biographies are my favorite kind of thing to read, so I have been indulging myself for People April. For People. And last night, I'm adding a book to my night's reading, a biographical work of some kind or other. I'm adding something like that every night. And last night, when I'm done with my sort of walking around day, when the sun is down and my dog is starting to get overnight sleepy, that's when I start to think about the night's reading. That's when I start to assemble what it's going to be, give it its natural shape. So the first few hours of that reading will be full bore, full on. I'll have a pencil in hand, or I'll be annotating on a tablet. I'll be in work mode still. I'll be reading critically. I'll be annotating critically. I'll be assessing the work with an eye towards building material to review it, to write about it. But then after that, after those first couple of hours, then the reading gets a little more relaxed. Then it's first impressions, first pass-throughs of things that are much further down the line, don't need to worry about being critically available for them yet, or older stuff. And whatever demands BookTube is making on my reading. That's when it comes in, is later in the night. But last night, one of those forward things, one of the first things, was big. It was big. It took a lot of time. I gave it a lot of time. It took more time than I thought, and I was perfectly okay with that. And that shortens up the rest of the night. Plus, there reaches a point where my little dog she sleeps wedged right next to me. Sometimes, if she's feeling chilly, and she gets a little chilly a little easier now that she's not a puppy anymore, sometimes not only wedged on top of me, but maybe inching on top of me. So not wedged against my side, but eventually making her way on top of me, almost as if she were affectionate, which she isn't. And after a certain point of doing that, she makes it pretty clear that she wants the lights to go off in the room. And that's okay by me, because my tablet and my e-reader have a light source of their own that is too low to bother anybody. So that's a godsend. That's been true for years now. I can't imagine going back to a lantern shade on one candle or something like that, so that you don't bother anybody who's sleeping with you. I can't imagine going back to that. And I shorten up those end periods if the front period ends up taking more time and effort than I thought. The fully lit period, the music playing in the background period, the annotating period. If that takes up more time, then I shorten up the back end. I rearrange the picks that I made. And that had to happen last night. So the biographical thing that I wanted to read last night, I didn't read. Instead, I picked something intentionally for its brevity. I picked this. Poe, A Life Cut Short by Peter Ackroyd. Peter Ackroyd is an extremely popular historian, a popular historian. I love him. I think his work is terrific. I'm not that sold on his fiction, but I love his history and his biographies. And he has a Brief Lives series that I read, the one on Chaucer, and I liked it fine, but I was not in any way impressed by it. So I had no real desire to hunt down any of the others. And the other Brief Lives that he's done. These things are like 200 pages long, if that. But I thought I would give his one on Edgar Allan Poe a try. Because Edgar Allan Poe did not live a long life. And some of it is easier to write about than others. A lot of the time that he was writing, a lot of those years that he lived, those few years that he lived, he was mostly writing, mostly living on the page. So pretty boring for biographical stuff. I've read, I don't know, a dozen Edgar Allan Poe biographies, including a couple of really, really good full-dress things, one by Silverman that I cannot recommend strongly enough. But this isn't that. And I knew that going in. This is a biographical sketch. And with biographical sketches, whether they are British monarchs or writers or U.S. presidents or whatever, usually, if you're lucky, if it's done well, the raconteur personality of the biographer will start to edge the subject out of the center stage. And that'll be good. That'll be a good thing, provided the writer can do it, provided the writer can pull it off. I didn't think that really worked with the Chaucer book, but it works perfectly here, right down to the tongue-in-cheek subtitle. Because Edgar Allan Poe, of course, famously died early, and for reasons that were, I mean, it was cirrhosis of the liver, almost certainly, but there's that gap of time. He disappears from the historical record for a short gap of time, then reappears sodden drunk and on death's doorstep. And we don't know anything about where he was in that time. And it wasn't staged like Agatha Christie. It was real. It was a real disappearance. So not only was his life cut short, but this is a short biography. So you've got the tongue-in-cheek right there in the subtitle. And I don't get the impression from this book that Peter Ackroyd has spent a whole lifetime lovingly reading Edgar Allan Poe, as I have. I don't get that impression. I got a little bit of that impression with Chaucer. And I'm not conversant off the top of my head with who the other people are in this series that he's written about. But he knows the story. And when you get a brief life like this, Penguin did a brief life series. There was a brief life history of the U.S. presidents. There have been many, including a series going on now, brief lives of British monarchs. When you're going to do this, and you get the brief to do this, you know that you're going to have to be more anecdotal. You know who your audience is for these things. No serious Edgar Allan Poe biography reader is going to come to this thinking they're going to get another serious Edgar Allan Poe biography. That's no insult to Peter Ackroyd. That no one's going to come to this expecting that. And that's not what you get. Instead, you get a very impressionistic walkthrough of the sources by a wonderful raconteur, by a terrific writer. And that's all that this was that. It was, so when you get to areas where you can titillate or speculate, Poe's love life, for instance, or that disappearance of his, well, then Peter Ackroyd shines, because he might not be the best at pre-Civil War tensions in the United States, but he's terrific when he gets to human-driven drama like that, and that was the highlight of this book. So it took barely any time at all for me to read, but it was well worth it. It was well worth it. I don't know that this actually rises to the level that Nureyev did yesterday, the video that I did yesterday. Some books that I read like this, that I'm just chucking onto the pile at night, impress me so much that I know that I want a copy, a print and paper copy in hardcover with a dust jacket. I have no idea why that is. I have no idea why, if you have an e-copy, you would ever want a hardcover. But nevertheless, it seems to be the way my e-reading and just book tastes in general have shaken out. If I saw a hardcover copy of that Nureyev biography, I would get it. I would probably pass this up. This is okay as an ebook. I don't, at the moment, have any print and paper biographies of Edgar Allan Poe, except the really neat short one by Julian Simmons. It's really, really good, but I don't have any others. And there are a couple that are really worth having. I don't have them. There are a couple of later ones that we've seen on this channel that I wasn't all that impressed by. They seem woodenly written. And you know already what I think about that. Peter Ackroyd certainly knows what I think about that. You have to do this job first. So I say that readers, fans of exhaustively detailed 800-page biographies of Edgar Allan Poe probably won't come to this book expecting anything like historical insight into sources or a critical reappraisal of primary materials. You won't come to this book for that. Okay, fine. But you shouldn't dismiss this book for what it gives you, especially since the writers of major biographies often don't give you that, which is a lively narrative. Peter Ackroyd is on these pages all the time. It's lively and very entertaining. I don't discount that at all, even though I didn't learn anything from this, even though there weren't really any insights into any part of Edgar Allan Poe that made me think, ooh, I've never heard that put quite that way before. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. I was still just overjoyed. And I have to confess, I don't know if this is true. I almost got the impression, at several points in this book, I got the impression that the sheer misery of Edgar Allan Poe's life, I don't think Edgar Allan Poe was happy more than 2 times in his life. The sheer misery of the narrating of the events of his life, I got the distinct impression at points in this book that Peter Ackroyd was trying hard not to crack up. I don't know anything about this author. I don't know if maybe he is a congenitally happy person. Certainly his prose seems that way. I felt a little bit of sympathy because when I read full-dress Edgar Allan Poe biographies, I often feel a little urge to titter. This is a person who made most of his own problems. So yes, he led a miserable life, but any one of the high-profile jobs that he had in his life, he could have kept if he hadn't been a monumental screw-up. And every single time that he was a monumental screw-up, he knew he was screwing up and just didn't feel like stopping himself. It's pretty hard to feel like there's a huge blanket of tragedy hanging over such a figure. It'd be different if he'd grown up in a slum and never worked his way out of it, but he was brilliant. So he could have worked his way out of anything if with the opportunities that he got. It was nice to feel that I was not alone. I got the distinct impression that Ackroyd was trying hard not to simply giggle at some of the darkest points in Edgar Allan Poe's life. And I have often felt that urge. So I don't think I would, if I found a tiny little hardcover of this, I don't think I would buy it, but it was a hoot to read. And it was necessary for me to go to something like this because I just didn't have the time for anything bigger. So I will try to do something bigger tonight to compensate, and I will report back tomorrow. Thank you, BookTube.